musicologist. This is Amari Music Talk. I'm Richard Cole. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back. All right, so it's the first new episode in quite a while. As you can see, new location, still a work in progress, but we're going to keep it going and keep it growing. All right, so today's episode, we're going to talk about Prince celebration, about less than 2 weeks away. Let's see, June 5th through the 8th. And on June 6th, they've got the stellar lineup. This is like a dream come true, but it's a dream that I can't attend. Like I said, new location, new responsibilities, and, just don't have the purple ducats to go check it out this time. But those that are attending, please, by all means, kick it up one time for me. All right, but we're going to talk about mainly what will be announced at Celebration. Because if you remember past episodes, and I'm not the only one that, raised this as a possibility, but, why not use Celebration to, kind of like a Comic-Con in a way, or D23 or CinemaCon or something, to where you have these presentations and you announce upcoming projects. Now, of course, albums and reissues, box sets, that's different than movies and television. But, I think what I pointed out in a previous episode where, Graceland, they are very effective at, including their fan base, and announcing, here's a Elvis documentary that's coming up. We're going to do this box set. And even if they don't have exact release dates, they're keeping you informed about what they are working on and kind of a ballpark on when to expect those projects to drop. So I'm happy that Celebration this year is actually going to do something along those lines and make some announcements. But what are those announcements going to be? So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. But first, I want to talk about the lineup. Like I said, June 6th, 7 p.m., Paisley Park Soundstage. And then shout out, if these are your favorites, Morris Day and the Time, the family, the original members of the family. So Jerome is going to be in the fold. In fact, hopefully Jerome is doing double duty, the family and the time. And then you've got Jesse Johnson. That's me. I wish I could check this out. But like I said, you guys that are attending, like I said, kick it up for me. But that is an amazing lineup that will be performing. That's like all three of my kind of like non-Prince favorites. Time is my favorite band of my generation. The family, I, kind of loosely call them like my second favorite band. That album, wish they would have been able to make more albums, but they did, few decades later, and couldn't use the name family and had to be F Deluxe, but that was a strong album as well. Jesse Johnson is probably, even along with guitar, even though I can't play like him, but as far as like his songwriting, his production, it's a major influence on me as an artist myself. So you also have, I don't know if these are local acts or if like the estate is kind of using this as a platform to break through, new or younger acts. But there's Johnny Venus and a Jada Nicole. I'm not familiar with either of those artists, but I'm going to definitely check them out and, see what their music's about. But again, like I said, stellar lineup. So first thing I want to ask about Celebration would be, will the original Time perform or just join in for a massive jam at the end? Of course, you have the current lineup, and over the decades, to me, in a way, they've become even tighter and tighter. I mean, still not the original time, which is what I would prefer. But, I've seen variations of the Morris Day and the time lineup over the years. And like I said, they have a great sound. And like I said, to me, they've gotten tighter over the decades. So, I wouldn't be disappointed if it was just that lineup. But again, there's something magical, just like any band, any group, when you have the original members and they all have that spark and that magic and that chemistry, sometimes that overrides, like I said, any talent within the lineup. What was that? The Sly Lives documentary. And I forgot who was it. I don't know if it was Andre 3000. I can't remember who said this in the documentary. But in regards to Sly and the Family Stone, you had the original lineup. But by the 70s, you had folks exit like Larry Graham. You had Greg Errico gone. The band kind of expanded a little bit. Yeah, that band was great. But that band was just talented. They didn't have the chemistry of the original Family Stone. And that's kind of like what I feel about the Time. The original Time, to me, is just unstoppable. Morris Day and the Time, like I said, I wouldn't be disappointed going to see them. And I know that it would sound great, but they're just really talented guys. They're capable and competent and strong musicians to put on a great show. So that's the fundamental difference. But it'd be nice to see the original Time perform that night, even if it's just for that night and they don't do anything else. We've been blessed to have quite a number of reunions with that band. So at least we have those if that's not a possibility for Celebration. But like I said, would they even just join the current lineup and just have a big jam session, maybe like towards the end, last 2 or 3 songs, kick in Jungle Love, kick in The Bird, kick in some 7779311, do those as your last 3 and just have everybody just come up at the end, but we will see. We will see. So next thing I really want to talk about, which is sort of the main topic of this episode, is what kind of announcements will we get? Like I said, I'm glad that they are taking this opportunity to, like I said, embrace the fans, possibly reunite the fan base, because there's a lot of division. I'll address that in a different episode. But, sometimes, it's just, like I said, just what do we have to look forward to? There's always been this silence. And then if there is something that drops, it just kind of comes out of left field. And yeah, we do get excited about it depending on what era your favorite is, or we just get plain excited because it's like finally some new product coming out. But, I think doing it this way with having an announcement, it gives you something to look forward to. So what kind of announcements could we get? The theme is the 40th anniversary of Around the World in a Day. Probably, and I'm not going to fall into that, rabbit hole of, it wasn't my favorite album. It was different. And it was the album that let me know that you're not going to get the same Prince twice. It wasn't 1999 Part 2. It wasn't Purple Rain Part 2. There were songs that I liked. There were B-sides from that album that I liked better. But it's not a bad album. And it's still an album that I enjoy listening to. Going to cover more about that album in some future episodes since it's the 40th anniversary. Also, consider becoming a Patreon supporter because I'm going to have some other content in relationship to that album as well. But since we kind of missed the opportunity for a Purple Rain box set for last year, and I'm glad they're kind of paying attention and decided to kind of steer away from the Purple Rain 2.0. I think really the only thing, if you still announce a box set for Purple Rain, I guess that would be okay. But for me, I'm ready to move past it. Got the audiophile Blu-ray. Check out my review of that. The 4K of the movie. Got that. So I'm just ready like for the 50th anniversary of that. So if you can put Purple Rain on the back burner till its 50th anniversary, I'm good with that. So let's move on to Around the World in a Day. It is an album that is a favorite to a lot of fans, and releasing it on its 40th, it's like I said, it's important to people that really, really, truly love the album, but releasing it, a box set on its 40th anniversary is perfect. It's ideal. It doesn't have to wait till its 50th, unless you get into that thing like, okay, here's the 50th of 1999. Here's the 50th of Purple Rain. Then you go to, all these 50th anniversary editions. But to me, I think this is the perfect box set that you could possibly release now. And I know there's people like, I want a Gold Experience box set, or I want something from the later years, or 3121 box. That's cool. And those things I'm confident that those will come. But I think right now, like I said, an Around the World in a Day box set would be ideal. Gold Experience, because there's so much overlap with 3 or 4 or 5 different albums, that I think the only box set that you could get away with releasing, and you can even do that for next year, is to do like a complete sessions box set, and then just leave the original albums to be remastered, or release the original albums remastered, but then you have the box set. And that's something that like what Bob Dylan does. Release a box set containing sessions of, that could span 2 albums or 3 albums. But then the original albums are remastered, and you can buy those original albums, and then you can also buy the box set as well. Not everything has to be, we got to have the original album in the box set, and then we got to have these sessions, and then this, and then that. You can switch it up. But I think the Gold Experience, you could do some 93 to 95 or 96 sessions, do that as a box set, and that would work. Also, since we have the original lineup of the Family, is it possible? And they're using the name The Family. They're being billed as The Family. If you go on Susanna's Facebook page, you go on St. Paul's Facebook page, and they're pushing merchandise. They're pushing T-shirts. They're promoting the show. They're promoting that they're back together, the original lineup, Jerome included this time. And, is it possible that we could get a remastered, reissued album of The Family? And if so, is it just going to be a reissue of the album? Could you get maybe as a bonus disc their one and only performance at First Avenue? Could you get that as a box set? I mean, not a box set, but could you get that as like a bonus disc or second disc or something? Or could that be released as a standalone in the future? But I would be happy just to have I've got the vinyl. So for me, maybe a remastered vinyl would be good. Definitely the CD. I would probably get the CD first and maybe the vinyl second, since I still have an original. Actually, I have 2 original pressings of the Family album. But, for me, maybe CD first, and then maybe get the vinyl, or hopefully, got enough purple ducats, some purple croutons, then, maybe get both the CD and the vinyl Who knows? But that's something that I would be excited to see. Could we get, and we've seen this in previous celebrations, but like an exclusive single, like maybe a vault single, or maybe something that hasn't been released on streaming yet as a single, or go the extra mile, maybe release a EP from the vault, just a few tracks from the vault, just maybe 4 tracks from the vault as an EP. One of the key things about Celebration is that they do play a lot of unreleased material at Celebration. Maybe, debut something at Celebration, play something, those unreleased tracks at Celebration. And then, like I said, maybe release a single, later, immediately after, or the week after, or, drop the EP or whatever it is, just release it after you've played it exclusively for the fan base, because just like Comic-Con, there's a lot of people that can't, myself included, can't make it to Comic-Con, but they get the exclusive. Now, some stuff, yeah, keep it exclusive because people are paying a lot of money for these events. But have something to where, yeah, have them experience it first and foremost, and then release it to the rest of us, so as an incentive to maybe want to go next year, or maybe eventually get there. Or, like I said, it's nice when, certain trailers debut at Comic-Con and then you get them either that day or they come out a little bit later. And then, again, something to look forward to, something to get excited about is that. So I don't know. What do you think about a single from the vault, or something, an EP from the vault, or like in the case of what I used to call back in the day, the virtual B-sides from the Musicology album. We got all of those dropped last year. So, what do you think? Let me comment. Let me know your thoughts on that. Also, what are your thoughts on The Family? Shout out if, you love that album in 85 just as much as I did. That album from August, when I got it in August of 85, I think I still played that nonstop well into 86. In fact, over a year later, had even used Susanna's Pajamas, that track, in a TV production class, where one of the assignments was to create a talk show. And I used that as the theme of the talk show. And, even got the teacher hooked onto that song because he was like, "What's this?" And I'm like, "It's The Family. They're fantastic. They work with Prince, and it's a fantastic album." He was like, "Yeah, I like that track." Ended up making him dubbed a cassette form, with that album on that form. So, shout out if that was your favorite album. Shout out if it's still your favorite album. All right, so let's move on to, could they announce documentaries at Celebration? And if so, what kind of documentaries do you think will be announced, or documentary? We've had where the whole thing with Netflix got settled. Netflix is not putting out their documentary. The estate has claimed that they're going to work on their own documentary. They've even teased that they're coming out with multiple documentaries. And I don't know. I'm going to probably give this some thought. I don't know if I'll do a video on it or not. But, does Prince need a career-spanning documentary? I think the surface answer is yes. Definitely at some point, we do need a career-spanning documentary. And I don't want a whitewash documentary, but then I don't want a sensationalist piece either. It's like, keep it focused on the artistry, keep it focused on the music. And sometimes, genius and insanity can kind of sometimes be that fine line. Don't shy away from certain topics, don't shy away from but keep it balanced. Just keep it balanced. And hopefully we can all walk away with a greater understanding of the artist without getting, too far down a rabbit hole of, fantasy and reality, and sensationalism versus education and information. So, will we get announcement of a career spanning documentary? Like I said, it's been kind of teased that we'll probably get one of those in 2026 or 2027. That being said, while they were still trying to wrestle with Netflix on keeping their version of the documentary out, they may have authorized whoever to come up with, some pre-production or, some early production on the estate's documentary. That's a possibility. Another possibility is the August 3rd, 1983 benefit concert at First Avenue, which saw the debut of I Would Die For You, Baby I'm a Star, and Purple Rain. They were recorded there live, and those became the basic tracks for what you hear on the Purple Rain soundtrack. Years ago, it was announced that Apple TV Plus was going to air that documentary that had since been shelved. So is that something that the estate has on the shelf that they can get the dust off of and eventually put it out somewhere? Or is it still Apple TV Plus? Will that go to Max? Since it's Purple Rain and Warner Brothers still kind of owns all things Purple Rain at this point. Will it go on Max, or will it go to a whole nother streaming service altogether? Let me know what you think about that. Like I said, rumors of a career-spanning documentary. I would also like to see, just maybe individual documentaries. A documentary on Parade, and Under the Cherry Moon, like what makes the album work? Why didn't the movie work as planned? What is it that fans still embrace about that movie, even though it wasn't a universal hit like Purple Rain was a hit? Those things. I would like to see documentaries like that come out. There's so many possibilities as far as what you could do with the Prince documentary. But like I said, I think you could do an 8, 9 episode, 6 episode, however many episodes you want to make it for streaming. I think that's kind of the world that we live in now. I don't think you could do a 2.5 hour documentary and do it justice. If you do, it has to focus on a specific, to do one, say, on Purple Rain itself, just a documentary on that alone. You could do 2.5 hours and make that work. But to do a career spanning I think you do need some kind of multi-part format, even if you did, as long as the Get Back, where you had 3 episodes that were 2+ hours each, which added up to about 6 hours. So you could do 3 episodes in that length and make that work. But again, what do you think? Shout out if you want to see a documentary, career spanning documentary, or do you want it to focus on just a specific album or time period? A documentary on the whole, fight for creative independence. That's your documentary right there. Just to me, right there is your documentary. That 93 to 96, and it's got everything that you need in it. And again, there's enough to where you can't whitewash that period, especially towards the end, towards 96, with the release of the Emancipation album. You can't gloss over it. You can't whitewash it. But at the same time, don't sensationalize it. Don't exploit it. But acknowledge that as, something that is like, you're dealing with somebody that's had a major, major trauma on the eve of one of his biggest triumphs. And it's like this thing of, do you you shy away, and do you more, or does the show go on, and then that in turn it makes you, kind of insensitive to other, there's your documentary. But don't have that be the focal point. Have that sort of be the irony of that piece. To have that as the and like I said, get a greater understanding of how that was the catalyst, or him over, whether he overcame it or didn't overcome it. But as far as the many artistic and creative triumphs that came afterwards, that was as a result of this 93 to 96 time period, there's your story. That journey, 93 to 96, and every good and bad that came with it. There's your documentary. So let me know what you think about that as a possibility. Let me know your thoughts. And that is going to end this episode. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, become a Patreon supporter, and, let's keep it going and keep it growing. But until next time, create your day, create your life. Peace to North St. Louis.